Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown.
A possessed patient. I'm a fourth-year medical student in a developing country. I'm a bit skeptical sometimes, but after having these experiences, I believe that a lot of things that happen just can't be explained through science necessarily. And here are some examples of things that I have experienced which have really made me wonder. I was doing a night shift in one of the infection wards. At around 11 p.m., a 21-year-old woman came complaining of shortness of breath. From the chest x-ray and the physical examination, it looked much like she had lung edema. The pulmonologist and I were a bit unsure because lung edema usually comes from heart failure. It was 11 p.m., so there was no cardiologist that can be consulted as it didn't look like an emergency case from what we could tell. So a drug was administered. It was some kind of drug that makes you pee a lot. It's a diuretic. And it was to try to reduce the water buildup in the lungs. After about an hour, the shortness of breath was greatly reduced. The water noise in the lungs was also greatly decreased. The patient still felt that shortness of breath though, but we assumed that it was stable since the medicine was working. We were still a bit unsure what was the cause of the lung edema, but an echocardiograph had to wait till morning. It wasn't a common disease at all, by the way. So then around 1 a.m., her family all came along and they were all crying. I met them since I had to check her vital signs every 30 minutes to ensure everything was okay. So around 1:15, the father went outside. I went to check on the patient at around 1:35. The father came back with a glass of coffee with 5 to 7 different kinds of flowers that were dipped inside the coffee. After I finished checking up the vital signs and so on, I excused myself, and then the father told his daughter to drink the coffee along with the flowers. Suddenly, something in the patient changed. Before, she appeared very ill and barely awake. After drinking this, she didn't look like she was gasping for air. She was suddenly fully conscious. And then the father asked, "Who sent you?" The patient answered, but with a different voice, much like the voice of a little girl. "I was sent by Rob." The father asked in a calm yet stern voice, "Where are you from?" The patient answered again, "I died at the beach and was sent here." The father stopped for a second and said, "Rob, I can't believe you would do this to my daughter." And then the father started saying some kind of prayer or something, and the patient suddenly appeared very sickly again and barely awake. At this point, I couldn't even wake her up or ask her questions. The father then comes to me and asks us to sign a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate consent. I told her that we already started the treatment, which seems to work, and hopefully we won't even need to resuscitate. He looks at me with mild disbelief and said, "You don't know that," and proceed to sign the DNR. 15 minutes later, out of nowhere, the patient suddenly started gasping, crying, And then she just stopped breathing, along with her heartbeat, which just stopped. We didn't try to resuscitate her as the family refused it. So I don't know what happened there, but this patient just died, and that was the end of that. But it seems like the father knew something. He knew what was going on. But that's pretty much all I know, and it's the creepiest experience I have ever had. It definitely sounds like the father had some kind of understanding of, the psychic arts or something, and perhaps he was some kind of healer or something, or exorcist, I don't know. But regardless, it seems kind of strange that the girl didn't have a say in whether she wanted to, be resuscitated or not, since there was a point at which she perhaps could have communicated. I don't know. Just kind of a strange story indeed. A haunted reformatory. I often go ghost hunting at a well-known reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. In the fall of 2019, I discovered that there was a spirit lingering in the east showers area of the reformatory. No one knew about him, it seemed, so I kept him a secret for a while. We got pretty close. I was able to communicate with him. I learned some things about him, and he's visited me at my home too, which isn't actually a problem for me, mind you. I use my pendulum to speak to him and to, get messages back from him too. And sometimes I actually see him with my eyes. So anyway, months later on another hunt, we discovered that he was being abused by another spirit, another entity, and it was, very bad. He was badly hurt. We found him hiding in a corner, scared for his life. So my father, who is, a sensitive with these things, he sees spirits and he's able to communicate with him. My father helped him out and escorted him to the hospital, which is on another level. So my father, who happens to be quite sensitive to spirits, ghosts and entities, and he can see them and talk to them, he decided to help out this dead man, and by escorting him to the second floor where there's a hospital wing, to get him checked out. Apparently there were other spirits up there still who, like doctors and nurses, who would be able to help him. So we went up a couple of hours later, and he felt pretty safe there, so we encouraged him to stay. After this happened, that's when I started to tell people of his existence, and I informed them of what had happened to him. And these were people who were connected to the paranormal groups and so on, and they understood this, so it wasn't something really weird for them. When I had first met him, I had found out that he didn't know he was dead. I felt like it wasn't my place to tell him, and if it ever did become my place to tell, I knew that it was still too soon. So then June 2020 rolls around. I invited some friends along with my dad to help me communicate with this spirit, because I knew there was something that had to be talked about. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew there was just something that had to happen through this communication. So up in the hospital, another spirit had been harassing him and telling him what to do and just kind of bullying him. And apparently he couldn't escape it for some reason. My dad was helping him understand, by communicating with him, that he doesn't have to listen to that bully, especially because he has no superiority over him. He was basically just a guy who was trolling him, and my dad started slowly easing into it, asking him how it's possible that he hasn't eaten in a while. reminding him that he is able to go through walls and leave rooms whenever he wants, telling him that he can leave whenever this troll is harassing him because he's no longer in the physical body and he can, move away from there. Then I felt a sense of anxiety and a kind of intuition that started to sharpen or something. But this anxiety, I knew, wasn't actually my own. I knew that straight away something was telling me that he was nervous about what my dad was saying to him. Perhaps he was afraid of, just trying to get out of there or something in case it went wrong. I don't know. I ended up taking over and I explained how we're all dressed differently, how we're all wearing masks because of a pandemic, because it's 2020, not the 1890s. I said, "Do you know where I'm getting at?" And my pendulum responded with yes. And right after that, I could feel tears coming. And I said, "I can't do it." I couldn't tell him he was dead, but he already knew. I started crying really hard and I felt a huge pang on my chest. And the kind of pang you feel when you've just been told a loved one had died. And I knew I wasn't crying. It was him crying through me. Now, I have never felt another's emotions before, and the pain I felt, I knew was his. There was no mistaking it. I just knew without any doubt. And so did everyone else who witnessed it. A friend who took an audio recording of the session told me afterwards that she heard a male voice say, "Dead," after I asked if he knew where I was getting at. And when she played it for me, I heard it too, and we knew it was him. I cried for a good couple of minutes and was telling my dad how heartbroken he was to hear that. It was really hard for the both of us, but eventually he, the ghost, grew to accept it. Ever since then, I've become sensitive to these things, and I can sometimes feel the emotions of the spirits that I speak to. Sometimes it's pretty strong, and sometimes it's not there. It was one hell of an experience, and I have grown to really love him very deeply, and I just hope I never lose him. That's how close we have become. I was told that we have actually a special connection, and I don't doubt it because I can feel it. It's really strong. I know my truth in all of this. I know that this was a true experience and a true encounter with someone who has passed over. And I shared it because I wanted to meet like-minded people, and I did. But there are always the bad apples and skeptics who want to put others down for believing in something as interesting as the paranormal. But anyway, I don't really care about that because I know that this is real. So the crossing over for this soul is actually going to be in November. And he will be in a happier and safer state after that. And he will be free of that bully and that place forever. That's a beautiful experience, and how fortunate that particular soul was to have someone who can accept that, that he's real, that he's still there, and that he's trying to communicate, and that could just, help him move on. I mean, what a blessing to have that, to have someone who is alive, but who has that ability to help others who are kind of just lost and just not knowing how to move on from that kind of limbo in between life and, and the next world. Really nice story. The Screaming Woman. I'm an EMT. I once showed up to a call for a lady that just had eye surgery, and she had to go to the hospital because her medication, for some reason, wasn't working for her and it was causing problems or something along those lines. So I was going down the street to her house, and it was something straight out of a horror movie. There was something really weird. The street light was flickering, and of course, she lived in this dilapidated old house at the end of the street with overhanging willow trees and such. It was really, really mad creepy. It was really kind of like something out of a movie. So, anyway, we showed up and we went inside. The police were already there, and there was a police officer talking to her husband in the kitchen. She was sitting down in the living room. She seemed completely mentally fine to me. So me being the newbie, basically still on my training wheels, EMT wise, they told me to just take her pulse and blood pressure while they talked to the husband to gain some kind of background info. So after I took her pulse and blood pressure, which took about 2 minutes, I was just talking to her, waiting for the senior members to just come into the room. She asked me what I wanted to do, what I was going to school for, volunteer EMS, so that's not my job. So I told her, and we had a nice conversation about pharmaceuticals because she apparently used to be a pharmacist. Then, all of a sudden, and this is where things get really scary and weird, she looked over my shoulder and her face, I'm not kidding, turned completely white. So, me being the smart EMT I was trying to be, I quickly grabbed her arm to check her pulse to make sure she was okay. Just to make sure that she still had a good pulse. She was cold as a rock, but she still had a pulse. Come to think of it, the whole room had actually become really cold. I mean, it was like almost freezing. That's how it felt. All of a sudden, she then just started screaming. And this was not just some normal little scream. This was like a full on, scared for her life kind of scream. "They're here to kill me! They're here to kill me!" she kept saying. I turned around to look at what the hell she was looking at. And the senior EMTs and the police officers came running. And I was looking behind me just like, what the hell do I do? I was so creeped out. And I didn't see anything. I didn't know what she was seeing, but I could tell by her eyes and her expression and everything that she was seeing something. So let me tell you, we just got the hell out of there as quickly as we could. And I don't know what happened after that. But, I didn't want to stay there too long. That's for sure. Kind of makes me wonder what kind of person she was throughout her life. I mean, why was she seeing something that was quite obviously bad waiting for her? Maybe, something going after her? I don't know. But must have been quite terrifying for the EMT or anybody there to just suddenly be talking to someone and then all of a sudden they start screaming that something's there and it's coming to take them away or kill them or whatever. Very scary.